Welcome back from, hopefully you've had a good summer holiday. This is our first new webinar Wellingtone community event since the summertime, so hopefully you're back and feeling refreshed. Today we're going to be talking about understanding benefits and OKR maturity. So thank you very much for joining today at lunchtime. My name's Arnaz-Pemberton. I'm the Director of Consulting Services. Today we're talking about understanding benefits and OKR maturity. This is a Wellingtone community webinar, the first one in September since the summer holidays. And today we're going to explore benefits and OKRs, but from a slightly different perspective. We're going to be looking at them through the maturity lens. Now, in order to do that, we have to understand some of the characteristics of mature organizations. So those organizations that are doing benefits OKRs really, really well. And we're going to also uncover how we can assess your benefits and OKR maturity, and also give you some tips and some strategies to start improving your maturity. And this webinar is being supported by a networking event next week, which is kind of looking at the systems and the tools that are available to you to be able to do this well. So let's get started with our webinar, talking first of all about the state of benefits realization. So when we talk about objectives and key results, OKRs, and benefits realization, one of the confusing factors is that people think it's two separate things, and actually it isn't. The OKR framework, the objectives and key results framework, is a tool or an approach to deliver benefits into our organizations. So here we have some stats from our State of Project Management survey. We run this research every single year, so we have like a pretty good view of what's going on within our industry. And you can see there's a QR code that you can scan to download this year's report. So we can see there how often projects deliver their full benefits. Less than 40% say that they actually deliver the benefits that they anticipated. So we're still not there as an organisation delivering what we thought we were going to deliver with our projects. And when we look at the PMO and how the PMO can support organisations when it comes to benefits, we can see that right at the bottom on activities undertaken by the PMO is facilitating post-project benefits tracking. So it's not something that many PMOs are yet involved in, even though it is a particular problem in lots of organisations, in fact, 60% of them. And when we ask the question, what are your current biggest challenges? Pretty much without fail, benefits realization is at the top. So leaders understand that it's difficult, that it's challenging, and we still haven't figured out in many organizations how to actually deliver effective benefits. And this is where OKRs, objectives and key results, comes into play. What that does is it gives us a new way to talk about benefits realization, a slightly different approach to tracking them, giving us maybe a different way forward. Like with lessons learned, we've been talking about it for so long that I think people lose focus on it. So maybe if we change the conversation around lessons learned and talk about knowledge management, this is kind of maybe the same situation where let's stop talking about benefits realization as a big giant thing and talk about OKRs. And by changing the conversation, that can really help us to get better at delivering and move that 39% to higher. So how do organizations do this from a characteristics perspective? So the first thing that we always say in project management is that there is a logical order of things. So you can't start your project management journey by delivering benefits realization. There are certain things that we need to have in play already for us to be able to understand if we've delivered what we thought. And these are some of the characteristics of the organizations that we work with who are doing this pretty well. So first of all, their framework and their processes are proportionate. So they're not just blindly applying a 5 or 6 stage process to everything. They're using processes and frameworks that are scalable, that are proportionate to the type and the nature and the size and complexity of the work. And that really helps us when it comes to benefits realization, because it gives us a clue, not just on the level of governance during delivery, but how much oversight do we need post-delivery to understand if what we've achieved is what we planned for. They, rather than look at delivery being a tool to deliver an output, a tangible thing, they talk about impact and outcomes. So they think longer about their projects and programs. They think about how are we going to impact people, our community, our organization, and what are the outcomes, the behavior change that we're going to hope to see as part of this change. So they take a much wider view rather than just focusing on the thing that we are delivering, the tangible physical thing. Most organizations who have mature benefits realization have a PMO of some description. So for those of you who are new, PMO is Project, Program or Portfolio Management Office. We don't mind what you call it, but there will be some way to centralize project management knowledge and wisdom and be able to evolve the practice and disseminate information about it. So there is a structure in place that is allowing that to happen. They also have communities of practice. So communities of practice being an opportunity for people to learn, share and grow together. So delivering learning and sharing events and making sure that people have the opportunity to feed into this new approach or the approach to benefits that we're going to be taking. So people feel like they're part of the conversation rather than it being done to them. These organizations, they also focus on continuous improvement. It's one of the lovely side benefits of having a community of practice is that we're able to have that conversation in a safe space about what's working and what's not working. So focusing on continuous improvement is a really important aspect that we see when we're trying to deliver better benefits realization. They're also assurance driven. So their ways of working are about providing confidence to the leadership that we're doing the right things in the right way. So without being able to give people the confidence that we're choosing the right projects and we're identifying the right benefits, then it's going to be really hard to get to the end without having seen some erosion at the other throughout the life. So making sure that our ways of working are assurance driven, designed to provide confidence, not just bureaucracy, which is what lots of people say, that's a real key enabler for mature benefits realization. And then lastly is we have to educate people. And when it comes to benefits, this is in a large part the leadership. So the leadership need to be educated as to how do we identify benefits? How do we challenge benefits? How do we validate if that is what we are really expecting? How much do we know versus how much do we think is going to happen? So making sure that our leadership is educated enough so that they upfront can provide that scrutiny and challenge in a friendly, kind of critical friend way, as we like to say, but also then looking at the back end of the project and programs to understand, did we achieve what we thought we would? And if not, so what? We have to be able to answer that so what question. Very often, and particularly in the public sector organisation, we actually lose sight of that because in many cases, the money's spent, the people have moved on to other things, that thing is in, it's working. And we kind of forget to ask the question, okay, what did this actually deliver from an impact and outcomes perspective? So these are all the things that you can kind of benchmark yourself against when how many of these can you really tick? Are your processes and your framework proportionate to the project? Are you talking about outcomes? Do you have a central space where this can kind of live and sit in terms of the practice? And do you have that focus on confidence, on continuous improvement? And do you have an engaged leadership that are going to help you with that? In terms of assessing maturity, quite often we talk about maturity for projects, programs or portfolios. We even talk about maturity when it comes to PMOs. But at Wellingtone, thanks to the research that we've been running since 2017, we're actually able to have a look at the maturity from a benefits and OKRs perspective now. We have enough data that we can start to benchmark people and organisations on how your benefits realisation is performing versus what other organisations are doing. And we do this by triangulating 3 different lenses. So we look at the theory of benefits and OKRs. We look at, in a perfect world, how would you do this if everything ran exactly how it should and you had all the right amount of people and the right amount of money and time to do it? We then look at the real practice. So we take that theory to understand how does that actually fit into your reality. Most organizations do not work in this environment that, we have all of the resource and all of the money and all of the time. So we need to understand what gets missed, what don't we do at all, what should we be doing, what are we over-egging in some cases, what have we over-engineered, to understand how that theory translates into practice. And then the third aspect is the human experience when it comes to benefits and OKRs. So actually talking to people to understand how they experience the processes or the frameworks or the lack thereof. And it allows us, this kind of process allows us to triangulate all this information to give a real view on what are your strengths from a maturity perspective? Where do we benchmark you on a scale of 1 to 5? How are you performing against other organizations? In most cases, we can do it within your sector. And what is the improvement plan? So what would be, Emma's key recommendations if it was my money as to where would I put my effort? So we can now assess maturity by using this really important 3 steps. Now, some of the challenges with getting or obtaining maturity, apologies, of obtaining, I'll start that again. Some of the challenges with obtaining maturity when it comes to benefits realization is, first of all, benefits are too large. So when we look at a project or program, we look at the whole pie and we look at in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time, we're going to achieve X and Y because of the change we're making today. So what happens with that is it's too holistic, it's too big. We need to chunk it down. And what objectives and key results allows us to do is to still monitor and track our benefits realization, but we do it in iterative sprints effectively. So we take some of the ideas from Agile and we use 3-month blocks of time to understand what are the key things we would expect to see that are going to point us in, are we heading in the right direction? But only for a 3-month period. So it puts a little bit more focus on very specific objectives and key results that we're expecting to see, meaning that we're not kind of every month looking at it going, right, are we on track to hit that in 10 years time? Which is too big, and it for some organizations it's just too overwhelming. And again, if I mention the public sector, if we think about the attitude, if we can call it that, of short-termism. So if we think about the way the public sector works, governments will change in 4 years or less, depending on what happens. And so we kind of make an assumption that if we're looking for a benefit that's going to come in 5 years, we're probably not going to track that because there'll be a change in government, which means changing policies, which means changing budgets and focus. And some organizations, like private organizations, also work that way. They don't have the ability to look that far out. So sometimes one of the key challenges that I find is that we're trying to look too big. The next part is kind of related, and this is the limited ownership. So if we open the APM project management body of knowledge, it will tell us that sponsors or executives, however you call them, senior responsible owners maybe, they own the benefit. They are accountable for delivering the benefit at the end of the project. However, we know that our senior teams are very busy and they're not going to pull reports every month to understand if we're going to hit this goal in the next 5 years. So what happens is we don't take ownership of the benefits as an organization. So as you've seen, one of the key things that we can do to help benefits realization using this OKR approach, if we want to, is to utilize the PMO. The PMO is a natural knowledge hub. It's an integrator, so it has all this information and can facilitate the process of making sure that we're tracking the right things, that we're having the right conversations to see where we are pointing to in terms of success or achievement of our benefits. So limited ownership is something we can fix. And that is one of the characteristics that we see from organizations who are doing this well, is that the PMO is actively involved in that process. They don't own the benefits, but they facilitate the process. Then the next challenge with maturity is that our actual discussions are not benefit driven. So when it comes to selecting and prioritizing our projects, benefits doesn't really come into it outside of how much is it going to cost me? If it's money, what am I getting back? And we need to have a much clearer discussion around benefits much earlier on, which kind of loops back around to the importance of having our leadership being educated as to what is their role when we are selecting and prioritizing our projects. As we go through the life cycle, we also kind of lose momentum and focus on that. We talk about the output and are people ready for the change? Is the organization ready for the change? And we lose the momentum of talking about benefits. So we need to make this more part of the day job rather than remembering at the end that we should have put something in place to track those benefits. And that kind of leads into this output focus. We need to be more focused on the impact that we are going to have, the longer term impact. And one of the things that can really help with that is by extending our time, cost, quality triangle with the 3 Ps of sustainability, which might make you think, but some of my projects aren't about sustainability. But the 3 Ps are people, profit, planet. And all those 3 things are about impact and outcomes. How are we impacting the profit line? So that is a more tangible benefit. But then the least tangible things where we struggle to put something down to measure are the people and the planet. And if we start asking those questions earlier on, how are we impacting our people? How are we impacting our planet? It will really help to change the mindset and get that much better discussion moving away from outputs. And then the last slide from me. So some practical tips that you can do. And again, there's a QR code there, so you can scan that at any point and learn more about the OKR framework. First of all, get the PMO engaged in facilitating this process. They don't own the benefit, but they can own the process and make sure that it's at least happening. Make sure that you educate your leaders as to what their expectation is. Do not assume that just because people are senior leaders, they magically know how to be effective sponsors. Do not make that assumption. We also need to educate those people who are routinely involved in projects. Quite often we focus on project managers. We now are starting to focus more on the accidental project manager. So those people who are SMEs but accidentally find themselves doing projects. But the ones that get missed are people and groups like line managers who are going to feel the impact, and their people are going to feel the impact, and they're going to be asked questions about the change in particular. So don't overlook people who are routinely involved or contributing to projects, because they also need some education and some support to understand what does it mean to be involved in a project. How do we look at that further? What are the conversations that we need to have? Changing the conversation during that early annual planning process to focus more on benefits and talking about the outcomes and the impact, asking the question, adding this to your templates so that we're at least trying to build that conversation right from the very start. You won't change the culture overnight, but it will happen over time. We need to also, for those PMO people in the room, is understand the PMO customer journey. So who are our internal PMO customers and how does this serve them? What is the journey that they go through? Why do they lose momentum? What can the PMO do to support them so that we're making sure that we are continuing the benefits journey throughout our projects? And then if you're interested in the objectives and key results, we do have a networking event next week that talks about that. But the OKR framework really encourages better conversations. It helps us to make more informed decisions because it allows us to focus on smaller chunks of benefit pieces, and it helps us to know where we are and if we need to pivot. And it also helps us to talk and discuss that human experience, which is really important both when we're measuring maturity, but also when we are delivering projects, is understanding that human experience of how did that change impact me as a person, rather than did I get the output, the system, the process. So I hope you found this useful and maybe just a slightly different take on benefits realization and some of the things that you can do right now, even if you're not going to change your whole approach, by making sure that you're educating, that you're talking about this all the way through the life cycle. As I mentioned, we do have this is our Benefits and OKRs month. So next week we have our networking event. For those of you that haven't attended that kind of event, our networking events are very much about having a conversation. So not recorded, we don't have loads and loads of slides. It is about having a conversation about benefits and key results, but we'll be doing that through the lens of technology. So do register for that. If you want to continue the conversation with us at Wellingtone, then you have my contact details, and hopefully I'll see you at the next one. Thank you very much for attending.